In the heart of a raging snowstorm, a battle-scarred veteran and his loyal German shepherd stumbled upon a frozen backpack and a desperate cry for help buried beneath the silence of the woods. What they found wasn't just a lost woman, but a test of faith, courage, and compassion that would change them forever. When danger rose and fear took hold, only one truth remained. God's miracles often arrive through the hands of those who still dare to care. If you believe that faith can still save lives, don't scroll away. Hit subscribe, share this video, and comment Amen to spread this story of hope, mercy, and divine grace. May God's peace and protection be upon everyone watching. The wind swept cold across the vast wilderness of Montana National Forest, where autumn was surrendering to winter. The sun, pale and distant, struggled through a blanket of fog that clung to the pine trees like a ghostly veil. The ground was damp and scattered with frost, every breath turning to mist in the air. The forest was quiet, eerily so, except for the rhythmic crunch of boots and the soft, steady panting of a German shepherd walking alongside his master. Ethan Parker, a 38-year-old former U.S. Army sergeant, moved cautiously along the narrow trail. He was tall, around 6 feet, his frame broad and still bearing the disciplined rigidity of a soldier. His face was angular, with a rough jawline covered in short stubble that hinted at both fatigue and resilience. His eyes, steel gray and sharp, constantly scanned the environment, a habit he never lost even after years out of the military. Ethan's hair, dark brown and slightly streaked with silver, was hidden under a worn ranger cap. Life had hardened him. His time overseas had left invisible scars, both physical and emotional, and though he now worked part-time as a wilderness guide and volunteer rescuer, there was a quiet weight in his movements, the kind that came from memories that never fully faded. At his side trotted Rex, a 5-year-old German shepherd with a thick sable coat and amber eyes that gleamed with intelligence. His ears stood tall, always alert, his muscles moving with precision under the fur. Rex had been trained for K-9 military operations, but after an injury to his hind leg during service, he was retired early. Ethan had adopted him shortly after, the two finding comfort in each other's silent company. They were more than man and dog. They were survivors who had learned to trust again, step by step, in the quiet corners of nature. That morning, Ethan had set out for a routine trail check. The forest, though beautiful, could be dangerous this time of year. Snowstorms could strike without warning, and wildlife, especially bears preparing for hibernation, were unpredictable. He was used to solitude, but there was something about that day that made the air feel heavier than usual. As they walked deeper into the woods, the fog thickened, wrapping around the trees like smoke. Rex's behavior changed. His ears twitched, nose lowered to the ground. Ethan stopped, watching carefully. The dog sniffed along the path, circling once, then darted toward a cluster of ferns beside a fallen log. "What is it, boy?" Ethan asked quietly, following with cautious steps. Rex barked once, short and sharp, then began pawing at something hidden beneath leaves. Ethan knelt beside him, brushing the foliage away. His hand touched nylon fabric, cold and damp. It was a backpack, navy blue, with a torn strap and a thin layer of frost on the zipper. It didn't look like it had been there long. He carefully unzipped it. Inside were 2 wrapped sandwiches, a half-empty water bottle, a digital camera, and a small leather notebook tied with an elastic band. He flipped it open and saw neat, slanted handwriting, feminine, delicate. The first page read, "Photo Journal Sarah Mitchell." Ethan frowned. He knew that name. He'd seen it recently on a permit request. She was a freelance photographer who had entered the park 2 days ago to capture wildlife for a magazine feature. There had been no sign of her since. He looked around. The area was oddly disturbed, branches broken, dirt kicked up. Then he saw it, a set of large paw prints pressed deep into the mud. He crouched, tracing the shape with his glove. The size and claw marks were unmistakable. Grizzly bear. And the soil was still moist, meaning it was recent. Ethan's pulse quickened. The tracks led away from the trail and into the denser forest. Next to them were faint boot prints, smaller and lighter, human, likely a woman's. But then, abruptly, the human prints stopped near a patch of disturbed earth. There were drag marks. He stood up, every instinct kicking in. "Something's wrong, Rex." The dog let out a low growl, his fur bristling. Ethan knelt and brought the backpack close. "Smell this," he said softly. Rex pressed his nose into the bag, inhaling deeply, then lifted his head and began pacing in tight circles before darting eastward, barking twice, the signal that he had caught a scent. "Good boy," Ethan muttered, slinging the backpack over his shoulder. He adjusted his jacket, checked his sidearm, a standard-issue Glock 19, and started after the dog. The forest grew darker as the sun dipped behind the ridges. The air smelled faintly of pine and damp soil. Rex's barking echoed through the trees as he ran ahead, his paws kicking up leaves. Ethan kept a steady pace, heart pounding in sync with the crunch of his boots. As they moved, a light snow began to fall, soft flakes drifting through the fog. Ethan could see his breath turning white as he called out, "Sarah! Sarah Mitchell! Can you hear me?" No answer came, only the distant caw of a raven. After another 100 yards, Rex stopped abruptly, nose pointed toward a ridge. He barked again, shorter this time, and looked back at Ethan as if urging him to hurry. Ethan followed the line of the dog's gaze. At the base of the ridge, through the mist, he saw broken branches and a faint red scarf snagged on a thorn bush, fluttering like a warning flag. He approached slowly, scanning for movement. The bear tracks continued uphill. The smell of damp fur lingered faintly in the air. "Damn it," he whispered. Whoever Sarah was, she had crossed paths with the wrong creature. Rex whimpered softly, lowering his head toward the ground again. He had the scent now, strong and distinct. Ethan knelt beside him, resting a hand on the dog's neck. "Easy, boy. We'll find her. Stay sharp." He glanced at the fading daylight. If she was out there, hurt and alone, time was running out. With a final look at the torn scarf and the fresh claw marks nearby, Ethan stood up, tightened his pack, and gave a low command, "Track." Rex barked once, deep and firm, then took off into the white fog, tail straight, nose to the earth. Ethan followed without hesitation, his boots sinking into the snow as he vanished between the trees. Just a man and his loyal companion, chasing the faint trail of someone who might still be alive. Several miles from where Ethan and Rex followed the scent through the snow, Sarah Mitchell adjusted the settings on her camera, her breath coming out in quick, pale clouds that drifted into the cold Montana air. At 32, Sarah was the kind of woman who drew quiet strength from solitude. She was tall and slender, with long auburn hair tied back in a loose braid that brushed the collar of her flannel jacket. Her complexion was fair, dotted with faint freckles from years spent chasing the light outdoors. Her eyes, green and sharp, carried both wonder and stubborn determination. The eyes of someone who had seen enough of life to crave meaning in small things. Born and raised in Seattle, Sarah had spent her 20s photographing cityscapes and human portraits, but none of it ever felt fulfilling. After losing her fiancé, a wildfire firefighter who never returned from a rescue mission, she had turned her lens toward nature, believing that if she could capture beauty where tragedy lived, she might heal something inside herself. This trip into the Montana wilderness was supposed to be her private pilgrimage. One final assignment before deciding whether to continue photography or give it up altogether. She crouched low, framing the amber leaves against a stream of fading light. The silence was serene, almost sacred, until a low rustle broke it. At first, she thought it was the wind. Then the sound deepened. Heavy footsteps, the crunch of weight against frost. She froze, eyes darting toward the tree line. There, half hidden by the fog, stood a grizzly bear. Massive, towering, its fur wet and glistening from melted snow. Its dark eyes locked on her, nostrils flaring. Sarah's breath hitched. Her camera strap slipped off her neck and fell against her chest with a dull thud. The bear took a step closer, sniffing the air. She glanced toward the log where she'd left her backpack. The sandwiches inside must have drawn it in. Panic surged. She moved slowly backward, whispering to herself, "Don't run. Don't run." But her body betrayed her. The moment the bear grunted, she turned and bolted downhill. Branches whipped her face as she stumbled through the undergrowth. Her boots slipped on damp leaves. The forest tilted and blurred. She lost her footing completely and fell down a steep embankment, tumbling through mud and snow until her right leg slammed hard against a rock. A sharp pain shot up her thigh. She screamed, clutching at her knee, twisted, maybe fractured. Above her, the bear roared, the sound echoing through the valley. Sarah dragged herself behind a large boulder, trembling, gasping for air. The sky was dimming fast. Twilight was closing in. She could hear the bear pacing somewhere above, snorting, confused. She stayed still for what felt like eternity until the noises faded into the distance. Only then did she dare to move. Her fingers shook as she reached for her camera, which had miraculously survived the fall. The lens was cracked, but the flashlight feature still worked. She switched it on, pointing the faint blinking light upward into the fog. "If anyone's out there," she whispered hoarsely, "please see this." The temperature was dropping rapidly. Snowflakes began to settle on her hair and jacket, melting into small, wet circles. Sarah tried to stand, but her injured leg gave out, sending her back to the ground. She bit her lip hard to keep from crying. She knew the wilderness well enough to understand her odds. Without food or fire, a night out here could be fatal. Still, she refused to surrender. She tore a strip from her scarf and wrapped it tightly around her knee, improvising a brace. Every movement sent pain shooting up her leg, but she kept going, crawling toward a fallen log for partial cover. She needed to stay alert, to conserve body heat, to signal rescue if anyone came near. Her camera light blinked weakly like a dying firefly. An hour passed. The forest turned silent again. The only sound was the faint clicking of tree branches swaying under frost. Sarah fought to stay awake, whispering to herself the way her fiancé once did during long nights of uncertainty. "You're still breathing, Sarah. That means you're still fighting." Somewhere in the distance, she heard a bark, faint but real. Her heart jolted. Another bark, sharper this time, followed by a human voice calling out. She tried to shout back, but her throat was dry, and only a weak sound escaped. She blinked her light 3 times, the signal for distress she'd learned during a previous assignment with park rangers. The wind carried the echo of her heartbeat. Then silence again. Her strength was fading, her eyelids heavy. The last thing she saw before her head slumped back was the faint glow of her camera reflecting off the fog, and what she thought was a silhouette moving between the trees, accompanied by the steady bark of a dog. A whisper of hope flickered inside her before darkness took over. Snow fell in thin, whispering sheets as Ethan Parker pushed through the dark forest, his boots crunching against frozen earth. The air had turned biting cold, cutting through his jacket like glass. His breath came out in bursts, each cloud of vapor illuminated by the faint beam of his flashlight. Ahead of him, Rex, the German shepherd, darted between the trees, his nose low, tail stiff, muscles rippling under his sable coat. The dog's sharp barks echoed into the fog, short, urgent, guiding. Ethan trusted that sound more than any compass. The forest terrain grew rougher, the ground dipping into shallow creeks and rising again into slick ridges. Ethan's legs burned, but he didn't slow down. Every few minutes he called out, "Sarah, can you hear me?" Only the wind answered, swirling through branches heavy with frost. Rex stopped near a half-frozen stream, pawing at the ground. Ethan knelt beside him, shining his light. There, a red scarf half buried in the snow, torn at one end. The same one he had seen caught on a bush earlier. He picked it up, his pulse hammering harder. "We're close," he whispered. Rex lifted his head suddenly, ears twitching. Then came a sound that sliced through the silence, a deep, guttural roar that shook the air. Ethan froze, every instinct screaming. It wasn't far, maybe 200 yards northeast. Rex barked once and bolted ahead. "Rex, heel!" Ethan shouted, but the dog ignored him, racing toward the sound. Swearing under his breath, Ethan followed, his flashlight jerking wildly as he ran. The roar came again, louder, angrier. Through the fog, Ethan glimpsed movement, a massive shadow shifting among the trees. He slowed, crouched low behind a fallen log, and drew his sidearm. The Glock felt cold and solid in his gloved hand. His training came back instinctively. Deep breath, steady aim, don't panic. But his heartbeat was erratic. This wasn't combat. This was nature, unpredictable and unreasoning. He crept forward, the snow muffling his steps. Then he saw it. A grizzly bear, enormous, easily 8 feet tall when it reared up, its fur matted and glistening under the beam of his flashlight. It was standing over something. No, someone. A woman lay crumpled beside a boulder, her leg twisted, one arm half buried in snow. Her hair, auburn, tangled and wet, fell across her pale face. "Sarah," Ethan breathed. The bear grunted, lowering its head, sniffing at her backpack. Rex stood a few yards away, growling low, his hackles raised, body tensed like a coiled spring. Ethan's mind raced. If the bear attacked, neither he nor Rex could outrun it. He needed to startle it, drive it off, not provoke. His hand reached for the flare gun clipped to his vest. "Stay, Rex," he hissed. The dog's ears twitched, but he didn't move. Ethan aimed high and fired. The flare burst in a blinding red arc, lighting up the treetops with eerie, flickering glow. The bear roared, in fury, swinging its head toward the light. Ethan fired again, this time closer to the ground. The hissing flame landed a few feet from the animal, spitting sparks. Startled, the bear backed away, growled once more, then lumbered into the darkness, its heavy steps fading with distance. Ethan waited, listening to make sure it was gone. Only then did he run forward. Rex was already there, standing guard over Sarah, barking furiously into the fog until Ethan's voice calmed him. The woman's face was pale and cold, her lips slightly blue. Easy, he murmured, kneeling beside her. Her pulse was weak but steady. You're all right now. He shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her, brushing snow from her face. Up close, she looked fragile, but there was something strong about her too, even unconscious, as if the wilderness itself hadn't been able to break her spirit. He recognized the camera still clutched in her gloved hand, its cracked lens glimmering faintly. You must really love your work, he whispered. Rex circled, sniffing the ground. Ethan noticed fresh claw marks gouged into the nearby tree trunk and blood droplets on the snow. Not Sarah's, likely the bear's from its earlier struggle. The storm had thickened now, winds whistling through the pines. He had to get her somewhere safe. Fast. He opened her torn pack, scanning its contents. An empty thermos, flashlight, spare batteries, and a soaked notebook. He flipped it open briefly. Inside, sketches of mountains and notes about light angles, written with delicate precision. She was an artist, no doubt. One who had walked too far into danger. Hang in there, Sarah, he said quietly, his tone softening. He turned to Rex. We need shelter. The dog barked once, as if in agreement. Ethan scanned the area, spotting what looked like an old hunting cabin half hidden behind a line of fir trees. Abandoned, maybe, but better than freezing out here. He wrapped Sarah's leg with a strip torn from his shirt, then lifted her carefully onto his back. She was light, no more than 120 pounds, but her body was limp, and every step through the snow was a battle. Rex walked ahead, pausing every few meters to make sure Ethan was following. By the time they reached the cabin, night had fallen completely. The wooden door hung crooked, but it still offered shelter from the wind. Ethan kicked it open, stepped inside, and laid Sarah gently on a dusty cot. Rex curled near her feet, his amber eyes glowing in the dim light of Ethan's flashlight. Outside, the wind howled like distant cries. Ethan shut the door, heart still racing. He had found her. But the night was far from over. The storm outside grew violent, the wind clawing at the thin wooden walls of the old cabin. Inside, the faint glow of a fire flickered across the room, casting trembling shadows on the cracked logs. Ethan knelt beside the hearth, feeding it another piece of wood, while Rex lay near the door, his head resting on his paws, one ear twitching at every sound. The smell of smoke and wet fur filled the air, mingling with the bitter scent of cold air that crept through the gaps in the walls. On the small cot against the wall, Sarah Mitchell stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes still clouded by exhaustion. She winced as she tried to move her leg, then realized there was a folded jacket beneath it, Ethan's. Her camera lay beside her, wrapped carefully in a cloth to keep it dry. When she looked toward the fire, Ethan was watching her quietly, his gray eyes steady and calm. You're awake, he said, his voice deep and even. You fell hard. Your leg's swollen, but it's not broken. You'll be fine with rest. Sarah's lips were pale, her voice soft and hoarse. You found me? He nodded, stirring the fire absently. Rex did. He caught your scent from the backpack. She turned her head slightly toward the German shepherd. He saved me, she whispered. Rex raised his head, tail tapping the floor once, as if acknowledging her gratitude before settling back to guard. Ethan poured hot water from a battered kettle into 2 tin mugs. Drink this, he said, handing her one. It's instant coffee, not great, but it's warm. Sarah smiled faintly, her trembling fingers wrapping around the metal cup. Warm is good, she murmured. She took a sip, wincing as the heat hit her throat. The silence stretched between them, not awkward, but heavy with the awareness of what had just happened. After a moment, she spoke again, her voice distant. "I came out here to finish something, a project I've been working on for months. It's called Spirits of the Wild. I wanted to capture how nature feels alive, like it breathes and remembers." Ethan listened without interrupting. The way she spoke, quietly but with conviction, reminded him of soldiers who talked about lost causes, still clinging to purpose because it gave them a reason to stand. "I guess I got closer to nature than I planned," she said with a faint, shaky laugh. "That bear, it was so massive. I didn't even think. I just ran." "You were lucky," Ethan replied, his tone calm but firm. "If the weather hadn't slowed it down, or if Rex hadn't been trained to track human scent, you wouldn't have made it." Sarah stared at the flames. "You sound like someone who's seen things go wrong before." Ethan didn't answer immediately. He leaned back against the wall, rubbing his hands together. "I've seen plenty," he said finally. "Army, rescue ops, people who thought they could handle nature, or war, until both reminded them they were small." She studied him for a moment. The firelight outlined his features, the rough stubble, the small scar above his eyebrow, the way his eyes seemed both alert and tired. "And yet you still come out here," she said softly. "It's quieter here," he replied. "And Rex doesn't ask questions." For a long while, neither spoke. The wind outside howled like a wild creature circling the cabin. Then Rex suddenly lifted his head, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Ethan's body tensed instantly. He grabbed his flashlight and gun, motioning for Sarah to stay quiet. "What is it?" she whispered. Ethan pressed a finger to his lips and opened the door slowly. The cold rushed in like a slap. His flashlight beam cut through the swirling snow and caught movement. A small, dark figure hunched near the edge of the clearing. At first he thought it was a raccoon, but then it turned, and he saw a bear cub, no more than a few months old, its fur wet and matted with blood from a wound on its shoulder. It made a soft, pitiful whine. Ethan lowered the light, his instincts torn between caution and compassion. The cub limped forward a few steps, then collapsed, panting. "Damn," he muttered. "It's hurt bad." Sarah had pulled herself up on the cot, wincing at her leg. "A cub?" "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. "Probably the same bear that attacked you. The mother must have been defending it. This one might have been injured and left behind." Sarah's eyes softened, filling with tears. She wasn't just being vicious. She was protecting her baby. Ethan nodded slowly. "That's what they do." Rex stood beside him now, alert but calm, sensing no threat. Ethan set his gun aside and stepped into the snow, approaching slowly until he was close enough to see the wound. A deep gash, likely from a rock or branch. He took off his glove and felt the cub's trembling chest. "Still breathing steady," he said. He carried it carefully into the cabin despite Sarah's startled gasp. "You're bringing it in here?" "Only for the night," he said simply. "It won't survive out there." He laid the cub near the door by the fire, close enough to stay warm but far enough to keep distance from Rex. The dog sniffed once, then lay down again, accepting the strange guest. Sarah watched as Ethan cleaned the wound with steady, practiced hands. The cub whimpered but didn't fight. For a long moment, Sarah just stared. At this man? At the dog? At the helpless creature? In that fragile circle of warmth, the harshness of the wilderness seemed to melt away. "Sometimes," Ethan said quietly, not looking up. "Saving something small helps you forget the big things you couldn't." Sarah swallowed hard. She understood more than he knew. Outside, the storm began to fade, and within the small cabin, 3 souls and a wounded cub shared the fragile peace that came after. Survival. By morning, the storm had spent itself. A soft golden light crept through the cracks of the cabin's wooden walls, scattering across the floor in narrow beams. The air smelled clean, pine and cold earth, mingling with the faint sweetness of thawing snow. Outside, the Montana wilderness lay blanketed in white, every branch and rock touched by frost. It was the kind of silence only found after chaos, the stillness that comes when nature exhales. Ethan stirred first, as always. His body ached from the night spent half awake by the fire, but discipline had long taught him to push through fatigue. He moved quietly, checking the coals, adjusting the logs. Beside him, Rex slept, curled in a tight ball, his fur glistening in the soft light, ears twitching at the smallest sound. The bear cub, lying near the door, was breathing steadily now, its wound cleaned and wrapped in a strip of Ethan's torn undershirt. Its tiny paws twitched occasionally, like it was dreaming of its mother. Sarah awoke to the warmth of sunlight on her face. Her auburn hair, now dry, shimmered faintly in the morning light. She blinked a few times, taking in the peacefulness of the cabin. The pain in her leg had dulled, though it still throbbed. She looked toward Ethan, who was kneeling near Rex, scratching behind the dog's ears. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. He looked over his shoulder and smiled faintly. "Old habit. In the army, sleep's a luxury you don't count on." She studied him for a moment. The light caught the lines on his face, the sharp jaw, the faint scar above his eyebrow, the kind of weariness that didn't come from age but from carrying too much responsibility for too long. There was something grounding about him, the kind of quiet strength people rarely notice until they need it. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything. I'd probably be—" He cut her off gently. "Don't finish that sentence. You're here. That's what matters." Rex stood and stretched, yawning, before trotting toward the cub and sniffing it gently. Sarah smiled. "He's got a good heart." "So do you," Ethan said, turning to look at her camera resting on the cot. "Most people run from this wilderness. You ran toward it." She laughed quietly. "Not exactly how I planned it, but maybe I needed to see this. Life and death side by side. It reminds me why I started photographing in the first place." She looked out the small window where the world outside shimmered in the morning sun. "Everything's temporary, but beautiful anyway." Ethan stood, pulling on his jacket. "We should move soon. The weather's clearing. Rescue teams will be flying patrol again by noon." He glanced at the cub. "We'll take him to the ridge by the northern tree line. It's open ground, easier for them to spot." Sarah nodded. She tried to stand, wincing, but Ethan was already beside her, offering his arm. She leaned on, him, her weight light but unsteady. He helped her outside, while Rex padded ahead, leaving deep paw prints in the snow. The air was crisp, almost painfully fresh, and the light poured across the forest in ribbons of gold. They moved slowly, Ethan carrying the bear cub wrapped in his jacket. The animal whimpered softly, but didn't resist, its head resting against his chest. Sarah limped beside him, her camera slung around her neck. Every few steps, she paused to take a photo. The tracks in the snow, Rex leading the way. The distant mountain peaks bathed in dawn light. When they reached the clearing, Ethan gently set the cub down near a fallen log. It blinked at him sleepily, then turned its head toward the forest, as if listening for something familiar. Sarah crouched carefully, raising her camera. "One last shot," she murmured. Ethan turned toward her, the sun behind him. Rex stood beside him, his ears perked, his gaze fixed on the cub. Sarah pressed the shutter. The click echoed softly in the cold air, a sound that felt sacred somehow. "That one's special," Ethan said. "I think so too," she replied. "It's not just a picture. It's a reminder." They waited together in silence until, in the distance, they heard the faint hum of an approaching vehicle. A few minutes later, two figures emerged through the trees. Ranger Tom Wallace and Officer Clara Hughes, both from the local wildlife rescue unit. Tom was in his late 40s, tall and broad, with a thick mustache and a weathered face that spoke of decades outdoors. Clara, younger, with short blonde hair tucked under her beanie, moved briskly with practiced efficiency. Tom approached, tipping his cap. "Heard your flare last night. We were worried. Looks like you've been through hell." Ethan smiled tiredly. "We've had better nights." Tom's eyes softened when he saw the cub. "You brought this little guy back? That's a damn miracle." Clara crouched, checking the wound. "He'll make it. You did good work here." Sarah snapped a quick photo of them as they prepared a small transport crate. The cub gave a weak cry before being lifted gently inside. She lowered her camera slowly, eyes glistening. "He's going home," she whispered. Tom nodded. "And so should you two. Storm's gone, but the cold's not forgiving." He looked at Ethan. "We'll give you a ride back to the base." Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. "Appreciate it, but I think we'll walk. Been a long time since I've seen a morning this clear." As the Rangers departed with the cub, Sarah turned to Ethan, smiling softly. "You really don't stop helping things, do you?" He shrugged, eyes scanning the horizon. "Guess it's the only thing I know how to do right." They began walking down the snowy trail, Rex trotting between them, tail wagging lazily. Behind them, the rising sun painted the forest in soft gold. Sarah lifted her camera once more, capturing Ethan and Rex walking side by side, two silhouettes disappearing into the wilderness. Later, that photo would appear in her exhibition, titled "The Dawn of Gratitude," symbolizing courage, kindness, and the quiet miracles that happen when humanity and nature meet halfway. In the quiet wilderness of Montana, amidst snow and silence, Ethan, Sarah, and Rex remind us that miracles don't always come as thunder or lightning. Sometimes they arrive as small acts of courage, kindness, and compassion. When a stranger risks his life for another, when a wounded animal is saved instead of ignored, when light returns after the storm, those are the moments when God's presence whispers through ordinary lives. Just like Ethan and Sarah found hope in the heart of danger, we too can find God's miracles hidden in our daily struggles, in a helping hand, in forgiveness, in love that refuses to give up. Every sunrise is proof that no darkness lasts forever. If you believe God still works through simple hearts and everyday kindness, don't scroll away. Comment Amen below to share your faith. Hit subscribe to join this community of hope, and share this story so others may be reminded that God still moves through people and through love. May the Lord bless, protect, and guide everyone watching, and may His light shine upon you and your family today and always.